I'm Justin Davis, and this is Joe Camp's RC. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis. Check out what we have back there today to review for you today. Another honest review. We're going to review the DYNAM Hawksky. This is the FPV version. Don't get it confused with the V2 because the V2 doesn't have a camera on the front, but this one does. It's 800 TVL and it actually looks pretty nice in my goggles. It also has enough power on this plane to support a GoPro on the front. I'm going to show you how to mod that on there as well. We're also going to try a 3S 2200, which the manufacturer suggests, and we might try a 4S battery on there. But if you didn't subscribe to my Patreon yet, by the way guys, click that Patreon link. Please get my Patreon going, man. It's pretty depressing how low it actually is right now compared to other channels at this same level. I'm doing a ton of videos for you guys, so I would appreciate it. Any amount helps. I'm begging, please help me out with that. But we're going to talk about this plane on the bench first after I quit begging about Patreon, and then we're going to go and fly FPV for you. And hopefully I don't have too much trouble landing right now because we do have a headwind, but where I have to land over here in the parking lot, there's a little bit of a crosswind here. I did a landing earlier and it was pretty sketchy, but we should be okay. Here we go. Okay, so like I said before, this is the DYNAM Hawksky FPV plane, and it's based on the Bixler. It's kind of like a Hobby King Bixler remix with FPV on the front. Right here you have an 800 TVL camera. The line is running all the way to the back of the fuselage right here, and there's a 200 milliwatt transmitter and mushroom antenna back here with switchable frequencies on 5.8. You have 48 channels, you have 5 different bands, and you only have one power. It's not switchable between power, so one bummer there, but 200 milliwatt will get me out there actually quite far on 5.8. It's a lot better than something like 25 milliwatt. Just wouldn't be enough for this plane, but they did 200 and that's gonna be fine. You do have all different control surfaces on here, ailerons, you have the elevator in the back and the vertical stabilizer and the rudder there. You do not have flaps on this plane because honestly you don't need it because it actually slows down a lot. If you cut the throttle and you have your ESC brake set up, that means that the motor will stop and you can just glide this plane in. I swear, if you actually had some type of a prop failure and the prop flew off, you'd still be able to glide this one back and land it safely as long as you had enough altitude to bring it back. But you have 2 choices to land this plane. You can use the included landing gear that came along with it, and you can just put a little tiny bit of hot glue on the bottom of that to secure it a little bit better. It does have 2 little screws there, and that little plate slides in and locks it into place. And you also have a tail wheel on this plane, which is kind of cool. That just locks into place with 2 bolts included in the kit. Now you do have to put this guy together. It didn't come already set up to go. The motor was installed, the ESC was installed, all the FPV gear is installed, but you're gonna have to assemble it, assemble the wings and plug in the ailerons inside there. I'm gonna show you that in the canopy in a second. It's a little bit of a mess in there, but I'll make sense of it for you. It's actually pretty easy. Now it also comes with a DTRM Gavin style transmitter. It doesn't have a computer display on here. It only has servo reversing channels here. It has high and low rates, and I might actually change those so it have a little bit more throw in the servos. If you go high, it'll fly a little bit better for you. If you're a new guy, I would suggest keeping that low rate setup right there. And you also have a switch on here if you're flying elevator or a V-tail setup. So seems like you can bind this to a different style plane, which is kind of nice. And the weight on this, you guys, is around 847 grams total takeoff weight. So it's a pretty big plane. It's actually a lot bigger out of the box than I expected it to be. Some of the other ones that I've gotten recently, like the Hawk I FPV GPS plane that we used last week on the channel, that GPS plane was smaller and a lot more fragile than this one. This one has a really durable EPO foam. I've already split this plane in 2 and glued it back together, and that's the cool thing about EPOs, the fact that it is really a nice thick material and really kind of beginner friendly. It's really easy to work with. If you break something on the plane, all you do is get a little bit of foam safe CA and you can put it back together probably even stronger than it was before once you do glue it. Now on the front of the plane, it's cool because you do have a flat spot right here, and that's pretty important to recording videos or sort of doing some kind of GoPro mod on there. And this is what I did. I took another mount from another one of my wings. I put it on the front here with a little bit of hot glue. That's all you need. Just pop that on there with a Velcro strap around the whole thing. And my Get Up cam records 4K video, so I can go 2.7, which I'll probably record today because that's going to give me a little longer time on the micro SD card in the back. But we do have a Get Up cam review coming up. You're going to love this camera. This is probably around $100 4K action cam. Super, super nice. I'll try to put a link down below for these guys for this particular camera. But the only con about this camera is that it's black, and when it does come off of something, it's really kind of hard to find out in the field. So I usually paint mine orange. You can see that little bit of paint there, it's worn off, but we're gonna fly that today on here. And by the way, if you do add something like a GoPro or any other type of action cam, it's gonna add a lot of weight to the plane. So make sure that when you make your mount, that you have it far forward as you can get it on the front of this mount, and that way the CG will be further forward instead of further back. You want more of a nose heavy plane and trim it out later mechanically or electronically. Either way, that's going to give you a better flying plane, but it is going to fly a little bit heavier with this particular camera on here. So for our flight today, I might actually take this off for the first flight for you guys during the line of sight flight, and then maybe put it back on there when we do some FPV. It's just going to fly a lot better with that camera off there, so it's going to have a better power to weight ratio without some type of action camera on there. But the FPV camera on the front is really, really nice, so you're going to enjoy that footage. I'm going to show you some of that as well during our flight. And the motor setup on the back of this plane is a pod style mount. It's a vertical mounted motor facing backwards, so the prop is on there facing forward this direction, and your thrust should be coming out this direction. If you do get this wrong, you're going to have to switch a motor wire inside here. And by the way guys, my Skylord 40 amp ESC, that can handle 4S, but mine went bad on me. This one came with the plane, and for some reason the last time I came out to maiden it, the throttle was acting all funky. If you get one of these planes and this ESC is acting up, I would definitely not take off. If you don't have a nice smooth throttle when you go to test this ESC out, something's wrong with it. You can calibrate this ESC pretty easily just by moving the stick, the throttle stick, turn on your transmitter, move the throttle stick all the way to the topmost position, then plug in the plane, and you'll hear this ESC do a series of beeps. Once it does those series of beeps, then you can put the throttle stick back down to the down position all the way down. It'll do another series of beeps, and then it will be calibrated. But don't fly this ESC until you calibrate it. Mine was calibrated, but it had problems from the get-go. So I just swapped it out for another 40 amp ESC that I had in my shop with an XT60 style connector on there. But it's pretty cool that it also comes with an XT60 ready to go, because most of us have XT60s. And it does have a brushless motor in here, and that's a 2810 1900 motor. So 1900 kV, if you don't know anything about kV, 1900 is pretty low. So that means it's not going to be spinning quite as fast as something like a race quad motor. You really don't need it on airplanes. And what that does for you is actually gives you a little bit longer flight time for this airplane. This plane does have a sport receiver inside it. It's by DYNAM, and it does have a little bit of a bind button right here on the receiver itself. If your radio doesn't link up directly to your plane, you're gonna have to go through the bind procedure, but it's not too bad. They do give you a manual for that. You're basically gonna start up the receiver on the plane, holding down the bind button just by plugging in the battery, holding down the bind button at the same time, start up the radio, and it should bind down to the receiver. Also, by the way guys, this has no stabilization, so don't think that you can switch a switch and do some type of stabilization on this plane. It would be nice to have stabilization on it, but I think they're working on a new version of this SRTF with some GPS and some stabilized modes, so look forward to that coming up on the channel. Hopefully they send us one of those planes. Now iStone is the receiver that you can put in there that does have stabilization. So if you're looking around on the internet and you'd like to take this plane and make it something with stabilization and sort of a flight controller in there, you can use that iStone, just all capital letters. Look that up and you'll have a stabilization mode on your plane. So if you already have this plane, that might be a nice upgrade for this one. And I guess overall it took me about an hour and a half to get this plane completely set up. I took my time to just make sure everything was set up correct, but the cool thing about this plane is it already does come with servos that are built into it. You have 9-gram servos there. They do have plastic gears on them. They're not any type of metal geared servos, but on a plane like this, you really don't need metal servos. Usually, the only time I really need metal servos is when I'm running something like a high-powered FPV wing. But it's cool that everything is pretty much built into this. The ESC is already set up for you guys. The receiver pretty much had to just turn on the radio, make sure that it was bound up, and plug in a battery and go fly this one. So after a little bit of setup and maybe a little bit of a camera mount mod in the front, you're pretty much ready to go fly. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna hand toss this plane right now. I'm not gonna do a runway takeoff because it's a little bit nose heavy with this get up cam on the front, but I'm gonna show you how it launches with the get up cam on there after we do the line of sight flight test first. Then we'll do some FPV after that. So let's go ahead and put a 3S 2200 in there, and I'll turn on the radio and we'll do some flying. All right guys, I have my FPV cameras all set up on here, and I'm recording on my SkyZone 02s right here, so we should be good to go for the live view on board. And I'm gonna run the camera after this, and I'm gonna show you some flying with that 4K camera on here. I'm gonna record that in 2.7K, by the way. Just gonna go ahead and do a surface check, up, down on the elevator, left, right on the rudder, and left, right on the aileron. So your aileron should go up on when you go to the left on this side. If you go to the right on the stick, this one should raise up. So now we're pretty much ready to do a hand toss, or if I have the cojones, I can do a parking lot launch over here behind me, which we might try that. Let's give that a shot. We do have to take off into the wind, so just keep in mind if you ever throw your RC airplane for the first time, you want to do it nose into the wind. That's always super important. So I'm going to set it down over here in the parking lot all the way back as far as I can get. Just want to make sure I have enough runway to get past that curb over there, and pretty much going to full throttle straight into the wind and hope we go up. Ready? Here we go. Oh man, just barely made it past that curb. This is why you guys are my co-pilots. You get to see all kinds of crazy stuff. It's actually flying way better without some type of sport cam on the front of it. And there's quite a bit of wind right now. If I didn't have a headwind, I might not have made it past that curb. So something to think about. If you do some type of like runway with this plane, you want to have plenty of runway without a curb. I actually did hit a curb last time I flew this plane and knocked the landing gear slam off of it. I just barely got the FPV camera above the curb, and the reason was because I had the sport cam on there. How you like this view? Is this looking pretty good up there? Co-pilot. I love FPV planes. They are like some of the most enjoyable flying like FPV experience that you can get. And the reason is they're just a lot easier to deal with than an FPV multi-rotor race quad. They're super simple. They only have one ESC on it. You do have to deal with servos, but they're not too hard. As long as they're moving the right direction, you're good. If not, you have big problems. So let's back off to about half throttle and see how it cruises at half throttle. Now I have this plane already trimmed in. It is kind of going up a little bit, but if you're heading nose into the wind, you're kind of going to climb anyway. It's climbing a little bit right now. It's going to come back around here toward myself. This plane wants to go up and up and up. This power to weight ratio is actually pretty good with it, just flying at stock like this. That's a nice view there, huh? Off in the distance there, if I turn a little bit to the left, you might see Mount Hood this direction. All the way out that direction. Way out there, and on a day like today, you can pretty much see everywhere. Over there to the left might be Mount St. Helens, possibly, I think. And I am pretty far out there right now. I'm at least 300 yards out there. This receiver is pretty good. I'm way further than I would take something like an XM Plus or full-size FPV racer receiver. And this plane has a lot of glider kind of characteristics to it. I'm just going to cut the throttle completely there for you guys and show you how it glides. So now we're flying with no power in the throttle whatsoever. Hands off glide right there. I'll take you back into the live view so you can see where the nose of the plane's headed. Isn't that cool? It's kind of veering over to one side now. It's turning downwind. Now it's just kind of circling in the air by itself. That is so cool. It's a really nice glide ratio. There, get it back nose to the wind a little bit. I'll just give it a little bit of right rudder. And I'm still no power. This thing will glide forever. And you know, if you lost ESC and you still had servo control, you'd be able to land this thing and not lose it. Now, if you go out of range, some of you guys might wonder what happens when you go out of range with an RC airplane. If you don't have any GPS on board, well, it's going to fail safe, cut the motor off, and start to glide to the ground. And that's what this one's going to do. And that's probably going to happen with this plane and this receiver setup. If you go out past something like, say, 600 meters, you're getting really, really dangerously close to the end of this receiver. So with the way it comes like stock setup, it's pretty much like a proximity style FPV plane experience. But this is a really, really, really nice flying plane. I love this one. This one is a much better experience than the GPS plane that I had on there last week. That plane had some issues that I had to work out. And a lot of that plane's issue is that it had a wing that sat way above the fuselage, so it kind of did a lot of bouncing around. And this plane is pretty much a hybrid of a Bixler, so that plane is pretty well tested in the community. A lot of people in RC already know about it. You can get way out there line of sight with this plane. It's easy to see. I'm gonna buzz the tower real quick, come straight down at myself. And on 3S, without the sport camp on the front, I have plenty of power. You're probably gonna get around 7 to 10 minutes flight time, depending on how aggressive you are with the throttle. So little motors up there working pretty hard, going downwind, trying to keep my altitude up. Whenever you turn, it's always good to pull back on the right stick, give yourself a little bit of elevator in your turns. I've explained that to a lot of people doing a drone camp. But an RC airplane is not a drone, as I know. I just say drone camp because that's what I do, drone camp. Looking good up there. And some days I really like to fly with just a little bit of wind. It really helps the plane like this glide a little bit better. I mean, even a 15-mile-an-hour wind, I would fly this plane in a 15, maybe pushing 20 to 25 miles per hour. I'd still fly this plane, as long as I had a good place to land coming back in. And with a little bit of headwinds, it actually land a little bit shorter than it would if you had no wind at all. It'd take a long time to land it. All the old guys always told me to come in long and low. Justin, land long and low. Bring her in long and low, Justin. Swing her all the way around. Now I could land it in the grass, or we could try to land in the parking lot. Coming straight at us here, gonna buzz the tower. It's really predictable. Look at the control this plane has. Let's just fly around low real quick in front of myself. You wanna watch those real sharp turns when you're low to the ground. I'm gonna use a little bit of rudder to keep the plane from tipping too far right or left. It's gonna help you turn a little tighter with that rudder and aileron combo. And you'll get into that a little bit later when you advance your RC airplane skills. But look at that, hands off. Oh, hands off. It's nosing into the wind a little bit. And you'll notice a lot of times when I'm flying, guys, I keep the sun to my back. A lot of the airplane clubs are usually set up so that during the day the runway is actually has you positioned with your back to the sun. It's very rare that you ever find an RC airplane club with it sort of all the chairs and the pits facing the sun. No one wants the sun in their eyes when they're trying to fly line of sight. That's for sure. I've crashed a few planes because of too much glare from the sun. Man, this is doing really, really well. I don't even want to land this plane. It's going to be the longest review ever. But that's okay. I think it's worth the $250 that they have this plane priced at. And I actually like this plane better than my Bixler. I have a Bixler, and the foam is not that same type of EPO foam. It's like the older coffee cup style foam. So it's really brittle and just really chintzy feeling in your hands. So when you crash with those old school foam planes, they crumble. And styrofoam crumbles really sucks to try to repair. So I'm gonna have a lot of headwind right now. I'm gonna try to land in the grass. I'm gonna try to bleed off a lot of that speed. Watch out for those stakes over there. Just kind of try to set it down right here in front of us. Look at that, it doesn't even want to drop down. Man, that's awesome. I was able to land this in the grass with those little tiny wheels. Now these wheels are a little bit small for the grass, and that's why I was going to bring it over there in the parking lot for you guys, because they are pretty small, and check those out. It's kind of a standard size for a park flyer type airplane, but they could be a little bit bigger. If you want to put some Tundra tires on this baby, you could take off out of this grass, no problem. As long as the grass is cut like it is here, you'd have a nice and easy takeoff. So let's go ahead and put another battery in this guy. Let's do some FPV up there together. All right, here we go, guys. Let's test out this FPV transmitter and see how good it does out here. I'm gonna stay a little bit close at first and just kind of circle the field a little bit and feel out this camera, see how well this camera performs. Sometimes you get a camera and it's a little too dark on the ground, at the ground level. This one looks okay. With a really nice bright day, look at that. That's a really nice picture quality. I see a little bit of noise there. I could probably use maybe an LC filter somewhere out there in between the camera and the power source. They do have it wired straight into the power cable. So if you're seeing any noise, that's why. But look at that, man. We're able to get pretty far out there. And this plane is really stable. Right now I'm nose into the wind. And I'm gonna cut the throttle. Let's just cut all the throttle. See the nose dip there? I can trim that out if I want to electronically, but I'm gonna leave it just like that. Pulling back a little bit on the elevator to keep the nose up. And to give it a little right rudder there. Start turning away from those trees. Now I'm kind of side to the wind. No power whatsoever. Isn't that cool? And this plane flies infinitely better than the GPS plane that I had on there last week. Let's just let's do some lower flying now, closer to the ground a little bit, because I kind of trust this plane. Since I can cut the throttle and it doesn't kind of tip and fall into the ground or do any type of stalling, you can really have a lot of control FPV in this plane. Right now I have 0 throttle in to the plane, and I'm actually going downwind, so I'm going to power back up right there before I hit those trees. Woo! That was close. I don't want to find this plane in the water over there in this creek. It's really nice through here. I'd like to get lower, but I don't want to go swimming. And you kind of take for granted flying a plane like this sometimes. The characteristics of this plane are so easy and docile. That's why this plane is a really good plane to FPV. Pretty much right after your takeoff, you're pretty much good to goggle up and just fly this plane just about anywhere. I'm gonna fly over here next to these trees, and I'm gonna come up to the right a little bit. See, and on 200 milliwatt, you know, like a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, this plane only has a 200 milliwatt transmitter. That's not going to get you very far. But look at that. There's the field over there. You're looking at the field straight ahead of you right there. We're pretty good distance from the field right now, and 200 is rock solid at this point. So I've had a lot of 5.8 long range experience, and if you have a high enough milliwatt, you can get way out there on 5.8. People don't even realize it. You don't have to really fly 1.3. If you want to go 3 miles, you can do that with something like the AK-1200 milliwatt 5.8 receiver. I think it's like $25. You can look that up on Google. Now, earlier when I put the plane down, I tested the 3S2200, and I had about 11.3 volts left in the battery, and I got like 12 minutes out of that battery. So that's a pretty good flight time, 12 minutes per battery. I still got plenty of signal there. Can't get much prettier on these days. So nice out. You can really hear that pusher motor out there. It's a pretty noisy motor. It's not one that your neighbors won't hear, by the way. But we have plenty of range on this plane. Plenty of range. This is a huge field out here. Coming back into our side of the field right now. Kind of low, checking out this road over here. Cool little recon plane, man. You can really get out there with this thing. I want to watch those turns so you don't stall out too hard. Coming back down the road. And we're running my Sky O2s today, my Sky Zone O2s, my favorite goggles at the moment right now. So I'm gonna fly this about 50% throttle and let off the stick for you guys. So now we're flying hands off the sticks. It can be trimmed to the right just a little bit, level out the environment. Maybe to the left. You can get a trim going pretty good on the plane if you FPV it. You just hands off the stick and let it glide. And you're gonna have a different trim setup if you're going nose into the wind, because you're gonna need more elevator. So if you fly crosswind like this, it's still gonna be pushing you around a little bit, and you can trim out just a little more on just a sort of almost crosswind, a little bit into the wind there. Get a nice trim out of that. If your plane is dipping too close to the ground, give it some right elevator down to bring that nose up if the nose seems to drop, and you'll see it level out. If I pushed it one more time, now it's kind of rising up too much, and I'll push it down one. Man, isn't that pretty up there? Glad you guys are my co-pilot today. Hopefully my get up cam is recording up there and you guys are seeing some spectacular 2.7K video up there. And if you're flying above 50% throttle with this plane, you're gonna eat up the battery quicker. So if you can keep it about 50%, you might even get close to a 15-minute flight time out of this 3S2200. And honestly, I wouldn't go over a 3S2200 because you're probably gonna start getting a little bit nose heavy. Now look at that, we got a really nice range out of that. If you see that your FPV view starts to flicker like an old school TV, it starts to get a little bit fuzzy, that means you're going out of range with your 200 milliwatt transmitter. So when you start to see it go fuzzy on you, start turning around and coming back, because otherwise if you go much further you're going to lose transmission. Kind of a rule of thumb for FPV in general, race quads and airplanes. So right at the edge of the field over there is kind of where I'm losing. right about the edge of the field over here. You can see it just start to get a little bit hazy. See it flicker there a little bit? Right at the edge. And lower to the ground, the further away you are, lower to the ground, is going to be more sketchy for your signal. So don't get too low, way out there. Now you notice when I turn back around toward the field, it gets a little bit fuzzy. That's because that antenna is on the very back end of the plane, and it might actually be blocking the reception a little bit coming straight back. So if you fly back a little bit of an angle, you'll get a better reception. If you're flying straight back at yourself, sometimes you will see it flicker. You see a little bit of flicker on the screen right there, even just like that. Just gonna buzz around the field right here. This plane is too cool. How stable is this thing, you guys? This is a really great review. I've got to say, I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a star rating while we're in the air. I've never done that before, but we're not back on the ground yet. I don't want to fly over water too much. I gotta say, 4.9 out of 5. This is a really high rated plane. I could probably go maybe down to 4.5 for that bad ESC I got. But if you contact Bitco or BitGo, maybe they'll help you out there. I don't know. It's a Chinese company, so that's you're at their mercy. But then again, a new 40 amp ESC, if you get one, you can get, I'll try to put a link below for some of the parts. You can get one pretty cheap for about $25. They're not super expensive. Buzz the tower. All right, guys, we're gonna do end this review, and I'm gonna come around and land this plane. And I'm flying below 50% throttle right now, with tons of control. There's a little bit of turbulence close to the ground. There's a lot of heat today. Just back off this throttle. Might come around one more time. Bleed off some of this altitude. I watch these stakes right there and this tall grass. And I got a lot of airspeed still. I'm gonna back off that throttle. Come down as much as I can. Cut the throttle. All right, awesome. So that's pretty much it for this review, guys. I'm going to cut the FPV feed, and I got to say, definitely 2 thumbs up for this airplane. If you're looking for an FPV airplane that's kind of beginner friendly, this one's totally easy to fly, and it has a lot of modability to it. It already has a line going all the way to the tail. If you wanted to swap out that VTX on the back of the plane, you could do that, and maybe add some 600 milliwatt or 800 milliwatt on there, and maybe even if you want to, you could add a crossfire module in there and do some long range with this airplane. This would be an excellent long range cruiser. That's pretty much what it is. It is definitely a long range cruiser if you want it to be. So thanks again for watching this review, guys. I'm Justin Davis, and as always, take care, help others at the field, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye, guys.